This is one of the best turnouts we've had in the last few months, so it's really nice to see more people here. And our speaker tonight is Karen Miller, and her organization, what she does is called Faith in Action. And she's a really dynamic speaker, and I think everybody's really gonna like her.
Well, thank you. Thank you very much, Nancy. Thank you very much, Nancy.
Yeah.
I don't know if the button's on. Did it stop working from the other room?
Need a new battery?
Hello, hello.
Push the button up. It's up.
There's just a power.
You broke it.
No, the power is right on the side there.
The power's on.
Oh,
The power's on.
there you go.
All right. Hello. I think it's kind of coming and going. So I will.
Try the on button.
She did. It's on.
It is on. It's
It's
coming from
on.
the other room, so yeah, I don't know. Well, how about this? I will speak up and project. We'll keep seeing if this turns on, but in the meantime, there are some chairs right over here if you want to move up and be closer to the action. You're gonna move up? Come on up. Should I just?
Yeah, it's not working yet.
Okay,
Yeah.
that's all right.
Signal's probably too far away.
Hello. Should I give it to you? You discover.
Hi.
Sorry.
Well, no, that's okay. All right. Well, hello. My name is Karen Miller with Faith in Action. I'm so honored to be here. Thank you, Nancy, and the Chisago County Republicans for inviting me to be here, see familiar faces, and I've been trying to go around and meet new friends. So I'm very honored to be here. Here is just a slide of, this is my husband Dave, and we have 6 children who we homeschooled. This was from a couple years ago, but I just really love and enjoy these photos. So I homeschool our children, but prior to that I taught high school English, and now I've started stepping out and doing more teaching in homeschool co-op settings. And then as I've become more involved kind of in the social political sphere, I've started writing more, and so I've started a Substack called Faith in Action. And the purpose of my Substack is to create a place where I can cast the vision of key exhortations and insight the Lord's putting on my heart or showing me through my involvement, and then also putting out vital calls to action. Because as you know, there's a multitude of things that can come up on the spot, or even that we know about in advance, where it's important to have a mechanism where you can get the word out so people know about these things. You can call your legislators, you can show up, you can pray, those sorts of things. So this is, it's my link, it's my name with an I-N, K-A-R-I-N, miller.substack.com. There's the larger than life QR code. Subscribing is free, and just if I post an article, then you would get in your email inbox. I also recently turned on paid subscriptions, so if anyone wanted to support the work I do, that's one way that you could. So tonight, I wanted to come and share some key exhortations of encouragement from the Lord that God has given me as I've been active to share with you. And so key theme, is there hope for Minnesota? I know, we could create a long list and depress us all, but it seems like there's a new report on fraud every day. We have the moral decline of our nation that our state is helping lead the way in, with kind of making Minnesota an abortion refuge state, a trans refuge state. And then education, of course, we have that the majority of students cannot read or do math at grade level. So, there's lots of things that can discourage us in Minnesota. And it may cause you to wonder, is there hope for Minnesota? But I want to encourage us all, of all the people in Minnesota, if you are a person of faith, we should not be discouraged. Where am I, my notes? Yeah, we should not be discouraged, because our hope is really our Lord Jesus Christ. This is a display for the Easter, a couple weeks over Easter. I was able to help put up this display in the basement of the Capitol, just with 8 cards about different events that happen in the Holy Week. But I just love the fact that there was a cross with this white fabric up there representing our resurrected Lord and Savior Jesus Christ. So there is hope for Minnesota because of God. God is our hope. And beyond that, those who have faith in him, you are part of that hope for our state. There's a verse in Acts 17 where it says that God made from one man every nation of mankind to live on all the face of the earth, having determined and allotted periods and the boundaries of their dwelling place, that they should seek God and perhaps feel their way toward him and find him. So I really want to encourage you that God has determined where you're living and when you're living, and you are here now. And so you are part of that hope for our state. So one of the first themes, kind of a call that the Lord put on my heart, is to stand as a champion for our children. I really started getting involved more so in, paying more attention, getting more involved in what's happening in my local community and our state in the COVID era. And as homeschoolers, our children were less affected than others, but although opportunities were still limited. But we were learning mask-free, we were learning in person, and more opportunities opened back up to us sooner than to the general population, or at least public school students. So I became concerned about our district with continuing distance learning, and then continuing with the mask mandates, and researching that and learning how harmful that prolonged mask wearing is, especially for our young learners. And the smaller you are, the more damaging it can be to have a prolonged mask on. So anyhow, that's where I started stepping out, is realizing, okay, I care about my own children, but I care about all the children in the generation that they're growing up in, because they are our future. They are the future of America, and they're really the future of humankind. So that's why I want to encourage you all with, is whether you have children or not, maybe you're a parent, maybe you're a grandparent, maybe you're single and you don't have children, but just to encourage us all, this is a place to start and engage and take responsibility for the entire next generation of our country, because they are our future. So standing as a champion for our children, that is the wrong direction. Okay. And as you know, America is really the core root of everything we're seeing is a spiritual battle. America's embroiled in a spiritual battle, and our children are caught in the crossfires. And so a couple scriptures that go along with that is Ephesians 6:2. It says, "For we do not wrestle against flesh and blood, but against the spiritual forces of evil in the heavenly places." And so we're seeing that manifested. And even beyond that, we are really embroiled in an ideological battle, a battle over ideas and beliefs and worldview, right? I love this verse. 2 Corinthians 10:4-5 says, "For the weapons of our warfare are not of the flesh, but have divine power to demolish strongholds. We destroy arguments and every lofty opinion raised against the knowledge of God, and take every thought captive to obey Christ." So that's a real battle. And then here is another insight the Lord, or God, pointed out to me as I was getting involved in things. And also last year I was in a Bible study on the book of Revelation, and all of a sudden I saw a connection between Revelation 12:17 and the very start of things in Genesis 3:15, and it all connects with, there really is a war against the seed of the woman. And we'll start with the Genesis verse. In Genesis 3, and this is of course after the fall, and God is speaking to the serpent. He says, "I will put enmity between you and the woman, and between your seed and her seed. He shall bruise your head, and you shall bruise his heel." So that really establishes right there that there is a warfare between the seed of the woman and the seed of the serpent. And in Revelation 12:17, it talks about a dragon representing Satan. "Then the dragon became furious with the woman and went off to make war on the rest of her offspring, on those who keep the commandments of God and hold to the testimony of Jesus." And I thought, there it is. There is the enemy going off to make war on the rest of mankind, especially those who keep the commandments of God. So I think we see this war against the seat of the woman manifesting in so many things, especially in our state. This is a photo from the 2024 March for Life. These are baby models. They're not actual babies, but they do represent the number of babies that were aborted in Minnesota in 2024, and the numbers that was the 2024 March for Life, and the numbers have gone up since then. These are the most recent numbers. The legislation changed, so we will not know the 2024 abortion numbers until December 31st of 2025. Of course, set to be after any given election. So, but these are the most recent statistics where you can see this war against the seat of the woman in the womb. In Minnesota, 14,124 babies are aborted every year. And that is absolutely crushing. And if you break the numbers down, it equates to approximately 1,177 babies per month, 294 babies per week, 42 babies per day, and about 3 to 4 babies per hour. And that's if you estimate that abortions happen 12 hours every day of the week. It averages out to 3 or 4 an hour. So by the time that we finished our meeting here, at least 4 to 5, or maybe even 6 babies could have been aborted within our state. So this is absolutely devastating. But it's a manifestation of that war. And nationwide, abortion really is America's Holocaust. Nationwide, 1 in 5 babies conceived result in abortion. So it's devastating. And even beyond that, in our state, and along with a handful of other states, taking that war against the seat of the woman from within the womb to even beyond the womb. So in 2023, the Born Alive Infant Protection Act was struck from our law. And you can see here, it's actually helpful to see the language and see how this works. So any language that's struck through, they were proposing to delete, and anything that's underlined, they were adding. So the first change you can see, it used to say, let's see here, a born alive infant as a result of an abortion. So it used to be very specifically talking about infants who survived abortion.
Okay.
They changed it to an infant who is born alive. So now we've gone from talking about just infants who have survived abortion to any infant who's born alive. Any infant who's born alive, anytime, any place, any reason. If you look down at the bottom, here's where they struck out that life-preserving care. So they, let's see, all start in the middle. All reasonable measures consistent with good medical practice, including the compilation of appropriate medical records. It even impacts the records that are kept on this. Shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to, it used to say, to preserve the life and health of the born alive infant. They struck out that part with to preserve the life and health, and now it just says, shall be taken by the responsible medical personnel to care for the infant who's born alive. So all that hospitals and medical professionals legally need to provide is care for the infant, and that word care is not qualified anymore. There's no descriptives there, so it could literally mean just wrapping the baby in a blanket and leaving it to die because it has such a horrific diagnosis that you think that is actually the compassionate and caring thing to do, would be to leave it, let it die on the table. Hang on to your questions. We'll go to questions. Yeah. So that's in Minnesota, and I don't have the number offhand, but there are a number of states as well that have stripped away protections for infants even after they're born. So then the war against the seat of the woman continues beyond the womb. The war against our children's identity and sexuality. Also in 2023, there was another bill that was passed. It was HF 146, and it legalized a right to, I call it gender-destroying care, but in the bill it's gender-affirming care, even for minors. And this actually means that if there was a minor child in Minnesota who wanted either medicines to like puberty blockers or things to help try and switch over their gender, which is of course not possible because every single cell in our body, 99 very high percent, is either male or female. But if there was a minor who wanted to receive either medicinal care or surgical care to try and switch over their gender, and their parents do not agree with that, if their parents don't affirm that, the state now has the legal right to take immediate custody of that child, similar to if it was discovered that that child was being abused. So that is a law in our state, and the way the language is written, it's any child who is present in the state of Minnesota, so that could be anyone from outside the state, but it definitely could be children from Minnesota. If a child is present in the state of Minnesota and unable to obtain gender affirming care, that then the state has that right to step in and take custody. So that's devastating. Since then, in 2024, about a year later, the Minneapolis Children's Gender Clinic reported a 30% increase in demand for gender destroying care for minors. And they now have a 1-year wait time for the program. So they have a waiting list, and they have young people waiting for over a year to even schedule a visit. And many of their out-of-state clients are moving permanently to Minnesota. I've read that in an article. They said they've decided instead of dealing with the hassle of commuting or whatnot, they're just moving here. So people are moving here to receive this destroying care. And another clinic, Family Tree Clinic, treated over 200 people from out of state in 2024. So these are just good things for us to realize, and realizing this is all stemming from the spiritual battle. And then education. So looking here, 3 legislative updates all Minnesota parents need to know. Do I have it on here? Yes. I do have posts related to that. If you go to my Substack and you look back to January 12th or August 20th, I actually have, let's see, 2024. So I think it was January 12th, I wrote 3 legislative updates all parents need to know, and August 20th, I think it's called Where Education in Minnesota and the Nation is Headed. So those are both excellent posts to share with any parents you know who have, especially who have students in the public system. But it's important to know some changes that happened in 2023. So there are mandated ethnic studies, which are essentially, it's not just, if you look at the description, it's not, okay, let's learn a little bit of the language and the culture and the dress and the holidays or cultural traditions of different groups. It's all about race and racism and political power. Let me find, my words have gotten ahead of my notes, so let me find where I can read you an excerpt. Aha, I'm not that far behind my notes. Keep it on track here. Okay. All right, here's a quote from the legislation, or it's a definition of ethnic studies. Ethnic studies analyzes the ways in which race and racism have been and continue to be cultural and political forces. The connection of race to other groups of stratification, including gender, class, sexuality, religion, and legal status. So it's not just learning about different cultures and dress and customs and food, it's about race and racism being political forces. And there have definitely been the Republicans in the last legislative session, now that we're in the 2025 and 2026, they brought up a bill to repeal that the requirement for mandated K-12 ethnic studies, and I did testify in favor of that. So they're working to undo that. The new teacher licensing standards. There are new teacher licensing standards that went into full effect this July 1st, 2025. So it means, leading up to this point, it might have been, maybe teachers had to follow it, maybe they don't, but from now forward, for sure, all newly licensed teachers have to fulfill these requirements, and it will impact teacher licensing at some point because these standards are, relicensure is tied to the standards as well. But it essentially forces teachers to affirm and implement critical race and critical gender theories in the classroom. So I have a quote here of some of the terminology that they added. It was like an 80-page document, and they added about 10 to 12 pages worth of information. So here are some of the things that teachers would have to do in order to obtain or renew a teaching license. They will have to implement critical race and critical gender ideologies in the classroom, such as systemic racism, implicit bias, critical race theory, white supremacy, intersectionality, social emotional learning, gender fluid identity, sexuality, transgenderism, and teaching students to be agents of social change. So you can see it's just rife with ideologically driven ideas that not everyone agrees with, and they're all fairly divisive. And in addition to that, in these standards, they deleted about 10 to 12 pages of academic standards for the teachers. Here are a couple examples. It's just like, I mean, my jaw would be on the floor if it could open that wide. So they deleted, this is one they deleted. A teacher must master the central concepts, tools of inquiry, and structures of the discipline taught. So teachers are no longer required to master the central concepts of their subject matter that they're teaching. And here's another one. A teacher must be able to plan and manage instruction based upon knowledge of the subject matter. Wow. So they don't really care if teachers can manage instruction based on the knowledge of the subject matter. So it proves their intention of shifting from academics and knowledge of academics and academic skill over to ideologically driven ideologies, and it really violates teachers' First Amendment religious rights. So what's a teacher to do if you don't agree with these ideologies, but yet this is what I'm required to do this in order to get my license or renew my license? And by the way, by requiring this of all teachers, it impacts any school where the teachers are licensed by the state. So private, public, charter, or even Christian schools, any school where the teachers are licensed. So, and I think, I did testify in opposition to this, I also think it violates, our First Amendment. There's two parts. There's the establishment clause about religion that the state should not establish a religion, and then there's the free expression clause. It definitely violates the free expression clause, but it also violates that establishment of a religion. I really believe this is establishing a state religion, a state ideology to which you must adhere, or you can't have your license. So it's important for parents to know. If you have parents or students in public school, it's really important for them to know this and realize that right now it's mandatory, it's in full effect. So they might have been able to kind of opt their child out of a certain teacher's classroom, or opt them out of this unit study or that book. But right now, you'd have to opt them out of the entire system if you want to really avoid this all, because it's basically mandatory. And one more thing before we go on, just briefly, there's also a big push for school-based health centers, so I watched this in the same year. First, you have HF1 passes, where you pass a right to abortion up to birth, even for minors. And then they pass HF146, which creates a right to gender-affirming care, gender-destroying care, even for minors. And then you're trying to push legislation to have school-based health centers, where you have students for 8 hours a day and their parents aren't present, and suddenly the minors have these rights and they're there. So it creates a really dangerous opening for them to either directly or indirectly access these things. So it's important for parents to know. So just a plea to parents of the Christian faith, our children are our most precious treasures. And so why would we hand over our most precious treasures to those who are ideologically opposed to us, and not just us, but to a system? And I will say the system, because there are Christian teachers and there are teachers who love to teach and care about the students. But why would we hand our most precious treasures to a system that hates God, rejects His truth, and is indoctrinating them with the gospel of the Antichrist? So it's critical. If your beliefs don't align with public systems, to opt your children out. Yeah, there we go. The roots of public education in America and the growing homeschool trend. There's a post on April 14th. And in that, I have a little homeschool pep talk, basically encouraging parents, if you're feeling like you should pull your child up, or you're just nervous, you don't know what to do, just do it. So that's a post on April 14th to share with them. And there's great supportive organizations for homeschooling. It's not the only option, but there's Mache, Minnesota Association of Christian Home Educators, and HSLDA, Homeschool Legal Defense Association. They're awesome, and they're a national organization. got your picture? Okay. So here's another theme along this route of stepping out and standing out to stand for our children. God really emphasized the theme this is from John 10, where Jesus says he's the good shepherd of call out the wolf and go after the lost sheep. You know, we're told the thief comes only to steal and kill and destroy, and I came that they may have life and have it abundantly. I am the good shepherd, and the good shepherd lays down his life for the sheep. In contrast to that, he's a hired hand and not a shepherd who does not own the sheep, sees the wolf coming and leaves the sheep and flees. And the wolf snatches them and scatters them. So I encourage you to just pray and think broadly and what you see going on in your community, in your school district, in our the laws that are being brought forth and debated, and notice where do you see the wolves of the enemy going after the lost sheep, particularly the young, the vulnerable, but it's not just children, right? And anywhere you see the wolves of the enemy seeking to steal, kill, and destroy, you know that's not of the Lord, and it's an opportunity for you to step in and stand up and speak the truth, and also think, okay, who's being targeted here, and how can I go after them just as an ambassador of the Good Shepherd? You know, so with abortion, it's great to pray about it. It's super important to vote for, you know, pro-life candidates, but also how could you go beyond your vote and beyond your prayer? Do you know your local crisis pregnancy center? Do you know where they are? Or, look it up, find the one closest to you, call them up and say, hey, can I visit? I'd love to come see what you do and see how can I volunteer, or how can I give, how can I support you? There's an organization called PLAM, Pro-Life Action Ministries. They're always looking for people who would be willing to be prayer support on the sidewalks outside abortion clinics in Minnesota, and also learn to be sidewalk counselors. So where they're there just to, in a non-confrontational way, but to be present and reach out hope to women and men too, to couples as they come into these clinics. And they actually they have great reports every year of the babies that are saved, the minds that are, the decisions that are made for life. Also, there's another great organization called the Child Evangelism Fellowship. You can host a backyard Bible club in your backyard over the summer. It's like hosting a VBS in your backyard. And the Child Evangelism Fellowship, they train teens and young adults how to run these. So you just open up your backyard, you spread out flyers, you spread the word, however you want to spread the word, invite kids to come, and of course parents are welcome to stay with their kids if they want. And then this team from the Child Evangelism League will come and run an hour-and-a-half long VBS in your backyard. They also do good news clubs, which are after-school Bible clubs in public schools. So an amazing thing would be pray about this, link up with someone in your community, and pray, and reach out to the Child Evangelism Fellowship and consider starting a good news club in a local elementary school near you, because that is a way to bring in the truth of the Bible and the truth about our identity to students who are being taught the exact opposite. So consider how can you be an ambassador of the Good Shepherd, call it the wolf, and go after the lost sheep? And here is just an example. I was mentioning it earlier. There was this summer, I don't know if you heard about the bill in California that would literally legalize child kidnapping, child trafficking, where anyone could go into a school, fill out a form, and walk out the door with a child. No proof of identity, no background check, no proof of how their relationship with the child, no parental notification, no proof that the parents aren't available. And according to this process, that person could also make medical decisions and educational decisions for that child. The purpose behind the bill, they claim, is to show care for children of illegal immigrants. So if while an illegal immigrant child's at school, their parents are picked up off the streets by ICE and deported, that someone could fill out the form and step in and care for that child. But the reality is, this isn't safe for illegal immigrant children. It isn't safe for any child. So in California, they were calling to have a huge rally at their state capitol. And I thought, well, I can't go to California next week, but I can certainly drive half an hour up the road to my state capitol, and I can spread the word and say, hey, if you want to come stand with me and pray with me, let's stand in solidarity with people who are resisting this in California. I call it a rally to protect America's children. And then it struck me that, the next slide. Then it struck me, I had an opportunity to go to an amazing event called Communion America. It was in October on the Washington, D.C. Mall. I've only been there twice. It's been thrilling to be there both times. But if you see, these are tents. They had 50 tents set up, one for each of the 50 states, and it was 3 days of worship intercession. And I was preparing to go and praying about it, and I thought, oh my goodness, maybe this is one reason why I'm going. Because at the time when that bill was happening with California, it was very short notice, like maybe a week until they were having that rally in California. And I thought, man, would it be so great if I had a contact or two in each state, and I could say, I can't go to California, but I can go to my state capital, spread the word, stand and pray there. Can you do the same, in your state? So when I was at Communion America, I went around with this flyer casting the vision for a national faith and action coalition to help unite and raise a righteous response across the nation. So I made some great contacts there, but that's just an example of standing up. And really, there's a psalm where the Lord says, who will rise up for me against the evildoers? And really, it's the people of God. I love this verse from Daniel. I love this verse from Daniel 11, 32 to 33. But the people who know their God shall stand firm and take action, and the wise among the people shall make many understand. So it's people like you and I who are discerning and full of faith. It's the people who know their God who will stand firm and take action and have a huge, huge impact. And I'm going to take a moment to catch my breath and catch up with where my notes are. So, let's see here. Okay, and actually along those lines of the people who are standing up, I want to put in this slide here, because I know you're a Republican county group, to show we have some amazing legislators. I am just so proud of all of our Republican representatives and senators. I mean, they are working hard to call out the wolf and go after the lost sheep and have the righteous impact that they can have. So, we out in this last session, 23, 24, we had a Democrat trifecta. They had total control and a slew of harmful things passed. Then in 25, we haven't had 26 yet, but in 2025, there still was a slight Democrat majority in the Senate. In the House, we started off one seat ahead, and then we ended up tied. But even though with that tie, the Republicans accomplished some amazing things. There were some wins of some common sense things and bipartisan things they were able to advance. They were able to block a lot of harmful things with that tie. I mean, thank God for that tie, right? And they were able to claw back and change some things, like some spending and things. So they definitely advocate for truth, life, biological gender, academics and education, parental rights, and protecting girls in sports. First of all, they showed up to work. I mean, I don't know if you hopefully you thanked your legislators, but go ahead and thank them again. Like, by the way, especially after we just had this national government shutdown again to the, really led by the Democrats, it made me think it's like the same playbook of what we saw here in the beginning of the 2025 session. Like, what, they're just shutting it down, they're just not coming into work. So they showed up and they worked hard the whole time. During the 23-day House Democrat boycott, as things kind of shook down there was that one seat in Shakopee that ended up, anyhow, they ended up one seat majority but then a tie. They still managed to secure the Speaker of the House seat for 2025 and 2026. That was a remarkable win, and it's Representative Lisa Demuth, and you probably have heard, but she is now one of the candidates for governor. She's running for governor, and she selected her attorney general would be Ryan Wilson, who ran to be our state auditor the last time around. So very excited she's running, and just grateful that we secured a Republican Speaker of the House for the 2 years. Also, they established a new fraud committee with Republican leadership and a Republican majority for both years. I don't know how they managed to secure that, but they did. That's a big win. No new taxes, given yay, that was a big win, right? They definitely blocked harmful legislation such as health care for adult illegal immigrants. Because of that tie, they were able to stand firm and say, no, we are not putting Minnesota's taxpayer dollars to those who are not citizens. They also blocked a proposed ERA that would violate religious freedom. In the wording of the ERA, it was deceptive. It would add in abortion rights and gender identity rights, but it would delete one word. The only word left in there that would protect our religious freedom, and that's the word creed. That's the only word in there that would still protect religious freedom in an equal rights amendment to our Constitution. So they were able to block that, but that's definitely something to still stay wary of in the future. They were able to claw back spending. They cut $40 million from the budget. And I would encourage everyone, you know, these bills that were passed in the House, there had to be bipartisan agreement. So anybody could look at those bills and pick out some things and attack their Republican legislator and say, oh, they voted for X, Y, Z. But you really need to have a conversation with your legislator if you're confused about why did they vote for this, and say, you know, understand all of what was in the bill. What were the things, what were the beneficial things and reasons why you voted for it? And there were a lot of things, for example, I do not know which bill, but there was funding for the Attorney General's office, and the Attorney General's office wanted $15 million, and they clawed it all the way back to $3 million, and which is the basic budget to fund the office. Like, we do need a functioning Attorney General's office. So they clawed back all the extra things they wanted, and they say, here, we're gonna give you the bare minimum to keep your doors open, which means actually that they will probably have to reduce, they'll have budget cuts and have to reduce within the Attorney General's office, hopefully some negative elements. So anyhow, have a conversation with your legislators or anyone that you know, we have to unite to win. If I like my, you know, Faith in Action t-shirts, but if I can make the next t-shirt, it might say unite to win. We really have to, as a Republican Party and behind our candidates, look for the things that we agree on, look for the successes, and seek to understand. And if something's upsetting you or you don't understand, have a conversation with your legislators. If you don't agree with them, express your opinion, because it might help shift the way they're thinking and the way they know what their constituents are thinking the next time a vote comes up on that issue. So, wanted to share that. Oh, and they did a lot. They pushed on HF12. They had a big push to protect girls in sports with HF12 stating only students of the female sex may participate in the elementary or secondary school level athletic team or sport that educational institution has restricted on the basis of sex to women or girls. And across the nation, 79% of Americans believe that males should not compete in female sports. Yet, unfortunately, in our state legislature, all the Democrats voted against this at least once, if not, I don't know if there were multiple times of votes. So those are some good things that they've been doing. So, okay, here is another point that, let's see, yes. Yeah, okay. This is another point that really drew to my attention. There's a man named Professor Matthias Desmet, and I saw he was interviewed by Tucker Carlson a while ago. He's from Europe, I forget which country, but he's a brilliant psychologist and I think mathematician. And he was talking about this whole concept of mass formation psychosis, kind of where you have just this incredible kind of psychological delusion through propaganda and just repeated, you know, lies being said over and over again that can impact a whole society. And what he was saying is that when that happens, and we can definitely see that pattern happening in our society today. He was saying that when that happens, about 1/3 of the population will be completely taken over by this mass psychosis. Another 1/3 of the population will be they'll be pulled, confused, kind of questioning a little, but he said it's critical that those who are awake, like the 1/3 who are awake and can see the deception, see through the falsehood and the lies, they must speak out. And he explained this vocal fraction is the only hope for society to not destroy itself in the atrocities accompanying totalitarian madness. So for example, like with the Holocaust, if even more people had stood up and spoken out, it could have prevented some of the worst heinous atrocities and violence of the Holocaust. So just wanted to encourage you, your voice matters, even if you're the only one in the room standing up to speak a different opinion or to voice a different opinion. And he uses this term dissident, which means disagreeing as in opinion or belief, not agreeing, dissenting, discordant, or different. So I'm here to tell you, you are called to be dissident. You're called to be discordant, and meaning not meaning that we need to be unpleasant or disrespectful, but it is so critical in any sphere you're in. So let's say it's a conversation with family members or neighbors or coworkers or a board meeting or a school board meeting or a city council meeting or a legislative hearing. Whenever you hear things being spoken that are not true, it's your opportunity to be the dissident voice and challenge it respectfully. One great way to do that is just to raise questions, just to raise a question of, even boys and girls sports of, do you actually know how this is impacting girls, or how this is impacting girls in our high school team or whatnot, or especially if you're a person of faith, how does what you're saying connect in with Genesis 1:27, where God said that he made us all either male or female? So just encourage you to not shy away from that, and we can be respectful, but it's your opportunity to be bold, and being discordant isn't bad, and it's necessary. So this is just an example of different opportunities I've had to speak in legislative hearings in particular. And another verse that God encouraged me with is Matthew 10:32. Everyone who acknowledges me publicly here on earth, I will also acknowledge before my Father in heaven. So just know, even if you feel unheard, unlistened to, unappreciated, God the Father in heaven sees when you are standing up for righteousness, when you're standing up for him and his truth. And just as you acknowledge him before man, he will acknowledge you. And Samuel Adams, this is a great quote by Samuel Adams. It does not take a majority to prevail, but rather an irate, tireless minority, keen on setting the brush fires of freedom in the minds of men. So be encouraged and actually be grateful that you're part of this tireless minority. You should turn to someone right now and give them a high five and say, way to go. Welcome to the tireless minority. But to keep going. Okay, so out of my involvement in the 2023 legislative session, that's really, before that I got involved with school board things, seeing what was happening at the local level. Then I worked really hard, I became chair of our Senate district and worked really hard to win and fill an empty seat with our Republican candidate, who is Representative Jeff Whitty, and he did get elected and he's doing a fabulous job. So then it swung my focus to the state level and realizing, gosh, we can keep fighting all these things on our individual school board level, but if I put my focus up here at the state, what's passed into law immediately impacts all of our school districts. So, but out of that experience, then I wrote a letter of exhortation to the church, and that is really what started my Substack. I was thinking, how can I get this message out to people? And then I realized Substack could be a tool. So this is just kind of an excerpt of it. So during that time of engagement at the Capitol, I was there on the days where the House and the Senate voted on the abortion bill and the gender destroying care bill. And there was a definite group of people there to oppose these things, but we were probably outnumbered. And I remember thinking, wow, why isn't everyone who's at all available here standing against this, especially pastors, Christians? Yeah. We should empty our churches and flood the halls of our state and create a traffic jam around the building. So, it really, because really right there you could feel the very front lines of that spiritual battle. And so I was wondering, where is the church? And just recognizing that in Minnesota we are really at a crossroads. That our state, Minnesota, is being heralded and celebrated as an abortion and trans refuge state. And so what is our response going to be as people of faith? And because the eyes of the nation are looking to our state and the Democrat trifecta as a shining North Star leading the way into the progressive future. So we are at a historic crossroads. But you know, in the face of historic evil, there is an opportunity for historic righteousness. So I hope that is an encouraging thought to you. And this might seem like a hopeless situation, but I'm here to tell you today, do not be dismayed and do not fear. The future is not lost because the future has already been won by Jesus Christ. And we, the people, have the power, but the majority must take a stand. Eric Metaxas, in a book, A Letter to the American Church, he compared the American church today to the church in Germany under the rise of Nazi power. And he said there were 18,000 congregations. And of the 18,000 congregations, 3,000 brave pastors stood against Hitler. In contrast, on the other side, 3,000 pastors supported Hitler or capitulated to Hitler. In the middle, there were 12,000 congregations that did nothing. They were silenced, they didn't take action. But the reality is that if even half of those 12,000 churches who were silent, if they had stood up with that bold 3,000 who were standing against Hitler, if they stood up and become the majority, they may have been able to thwart the Holocaust, or at least the worst aspects of it. So, church in Minnesota, let us stand up against the evil that we see advancing in our state. And James 2:17 says, faith by itself, if it's not accompanied by action, is dead. So I want to challenge each one of us, are we living like our faith in Jesus Christ is real? And in general, are we living as if God is real? Are we living as if our Savior Jesus Christ has been raised from the dead and is victorious? Are we living as if the battle is already won and we are standing in victory? 1 John 5:4 says, for everyone who has been born of God overcomes the world, and this is the victory that has overcome the world, even our faith. Isn't that awesome? So my prayer and my hope is that future generations will look back on the church in Minnesota and see a body of believers who went on offense with the truth of the gospel and raised a standard of righteousness in our state and changed our future trajectory. So church in Minnesota, this is our hour, and will you rise to meet it? So that was an excerpt from my letter. The full letter, October of 2024 is when I did publish it. So here's another theme that God has really spoken to me about. It's this invitation or call to cross the threshold. And here we have an image of Esther going before the king. And the scripture verse here, then Mordecai told them to reply to Esther, do not think to yourself that in the king's palace you will escape any more than the other Jews. For if you keep silent at this time, relief and deliverance will rise for the Jews from another place, but you and your father's house will perish. And who knows whether or not you have come to the kingdom for such a time as this. So even Esther had to come to a point where she was probably comfortable and felt very safe in the palace, but she had to realize that she had to cross that threshold from her private sphere to the public sphere, and from her private sphere to go before the seat of government. And she, in that whole book, she is the bride. And so I really think she is a picture of the church going out from the private sphere into the public sphere to go before the seat of government. And this really addresses directly the whole lie, I will call it again, a lie of the separation, a misconception about the separation of church and state. That whole phrase, it's not biblical and it's not constitutional. Nowhere is that phrase in our Constitution or our founding documents at all, really. It was in a letter that Thomas Jefferson wrote to one congregation, and when he used the phrase separation of church and state, his concern was more to protect the church from controlling influences of the state. It was not the other way around. And of course, biblically, we know we're called, that Jesus is to be Lord of all. And if he's not Lord of all, he's not Lord at all. So we know that we need to just scrap that concept altogether. And so, unfortunately, this caused a lot of Christians and people of faith to withdraw their influence from the public square. And so is it any wonder then, if Christians have withdrawn and we're not engaged in our government, then how can we expect righteous results? Here's a couple verses, very encouraging. When Jesus talked about the church in the New Testament, he used the word ecclesia. And ecclesia means it's a political, governmental term, meaning the leaders of a community, not necessarily just a religious organization. So when he was talking about his church, he was talking about we're meant to be people to be leaders in our community. And Philippians 1:27, it starts off saying, live worthy of the gospel of Christ. Well, in the Greek, if you look at it, the Greek root there, you really could translate that as do politics worthy of the gospel of Jesus Christ. So the church is absolutely, and people of faith are absolutely supposed to be in the political and social spheres with our faith. So hopefully this would be an encouragement to you if you felt a restraining effort or anything, that you will just bust through that, break through that threshold from your private spheres, the four walls of our churches, the four walls of our homes, to step out and put what we believe into action in our local communities, our school boards, our city councils, and our state legislative hearings, and our elections, right? Let's see, there were a couple pastors in Nazi Germany who had an important realization, and they phrased it this way. It was Pastor Dietrich Bonhoeffer along with Pastor Martin Niemöller, and they realized if they did not cross this borderline between confession to resistance, that their confession was no better than cooperating with the Nazis. So they realized that they had to cross that threshold as well. So Eric Metaxas in his book, I highly recommend his book, A Letter to the American Church, and also his follow-up one, Religionless Christianity. He says these are some quotes from him. So he basically said, do not let Satan keep you content in your own little corner. He owns the fence and he's pleased to have you sitting on it. Satan is fine with you doing whatever you want on Sunday morning, as long as you check your face by the door when you enter your workplace, your school, or halls of government. So evil only wins if we sit down. Evil only wins if we disengage or give up. And remember that silence is complicity, and God will not hold us guiltless. Not to speak is to speak, and not to act is to act. So, moving on, what are some tools here? So your vote absolutely matters. Let's see, how did I jump to that? So how do we cross that threshold and have that righteous impact? Well, it begins with voting, and your vote matters. Here are some statistics about evangelical Christian turnout, okay? So maybe you've seen this before, but basically 50% of evangelical Christians are registered to vote. So we're already at a 50% loss there. Of those who are registered, only half of those who are registered turn out to vote. So now we're down to 25%. Of those who actually vote, only half of them, or it ends up being 12.5%, take the time to research the issues and the candidates and apply biblical principles. So of all evangelical Christians, we have only 12.5% are voting according to biblical standards. So this is absolutely devastating, right? I mean, this is like sickening. You have to show hands. But look at this. I want you to see the potential for impact. If we can flip this statistic, there is tremendous potential for impact. If we flip this statistic, we determine who the next governor of Minnesota is. We determine who our next attorney general is. We can flip anything in Minnesota if we get conservatives and Christians out to vote. So my hope and prayer is to take the 25% turnout, I want to flip it. My prayer is, Lord, I'm looking for 75% turnout among conservatives and Christians in 2026. So let me see my next slide. Oh, yes, and it's close. Okay, you all have to take this information home and share it with. There's so many people have lost hope, right? They think, why vote? There might be fraudulent this or that, or there's no hope for Minnesota, or my vote doesn't really count. Yes, it does, because this is how close it is. In 2022, there were enough absentee ballots there was a couple counties in Minnesota where they could see there were enough absentee ballots that had been requested, but not turned back in. And had they been turned back in, we would have won the Attorney General's office. We would have Jim Schultz as our Attorney General instead of Keith Ellison. And we would have had Ryan Wilson as our state auditor. And that was just in two kind of outstate counties. If they had been turned in, we could have won those offices. In 2022, in that election, the Republicans lost the Senate majority by 1 seat, which was only won by 321 votes. And that is what created the Democrat trifecta. So, in one Senate district, 321 votes. And actually, if if it was won by 321 votes, then you need only about half plus 1 vote to actually have won it, right? So about 161 votes could have prevented the Democrat trifecta. It could have prevented all of those horrific things that passed. But it was close, right? And then in 2024, Republicans lost the House majority by 14 votes. There was 1 contested seat in Shakopee, and I actually think the Republican did win it. There were so many irregularities of 20 ballots lost, 30 people voted twice. It was a mess. But when it all shook down, they said that the Democrat had won it by 14 votes. I actually was part of the recount for that to help watch it and catch anything. And they had all the ballots in the middle, and they're putting here for the Republican, here for the Democrat. And then if someone did not vote for that seat, like there are a lot of people who voted just president, but they didn't vote for their state representative, that went in a pile here. And I'm telling you, that pile was like this thick. And I just thought, oh, if these people only knew the impact and how important it is to get the word out, to vote down ballot, and encourage people to take the time to research those candidates. And if in doubt, I did create I have a legislative impact 23-24. I'll get to a slide that has the date where I have that posted. Legislative impact 23-24, and I created a nonpartisan version of this, and I just said, do you know what passed into law under a one-party rule? And then at the bottom it said, vote to restore balance, meaning vote Republican. So knee-jerk reaction, if you're concerned about what's going on in Minnesota, vote R. So let's see. Oh, here's another great quote. I don't know if any of you are familiar with Dutch Sheets, but he puts out a devotional called Give Him 15 every day. And in October 23rd, he said, it's an accepted fact that if all evangelical Christians voted and did so according to biblical values, we could control every national election and position godly, Bible-believing leaders in office. And it's totally true. Yep, get a photo. Yep. I think I have another quote, but it's in my notes. Let's see here. Hold on a second. Hold on just a moment. Sorry, apologies. Okay. Oh yes, founding father John Jay, one of our founding fathers, said, "Providence has given our people the choice of their rulers, and it's the duty as well as the privilege and interest of our Christian nation to select and prefer Christians as their rulers." So that's founding father John Jay. So really this means in 2026, conservatives and Christians, if we turn out, we can flip everything for our state, and we can change the trajectory of our state. So your vote absolutely matters. So here are some tools. This is what I call the voter impact table, and it's something we began promoting last cycle. It was initially an idea created by a woman named Ann Boyd. She leads a Republican women's group called Women Advancing Freedom. And it's a very simple toolkit where you could set this up anywhere where you'd find a conservative rich environment. So where I was really trying to promote this is churches. I encouraged everyone I could to take information about this, approach your pastor and say, hey, the election's coming up. It's really important that Christians are registered and prepared to vote. And ask if you can set one of these up at your church. And it has QR codes that all go to the mnvotes.org. So it goes to our Secretary of State's website. It's totally nonpartisan, but it could be as a reminder if you set this up a couple weeks before each election at your church or any place where you find a lot of conservatives, and we give them all the information to vote right at their fingertips, like all the excuses of like, well, I don't even know who's on my ballot. Well, you've got the QR code for who's on my ballot, or I don't even know where to vote. We've got the QR code for finding my precinct place, or I can't vote on election day. I don't think I can vote. Oh, well, here's the QR code for other ways to vote where you could find out how you can vote early. So you can see an example at womenadvancingfreedom.org /early voting toolkit 2024 of what they have for 2024. And this is a great slide to take a picture of because, I'm gonna move this out of the way, because it also has the dates where I have made the legislative impact 23-24, and I also created a biblical values fact sheet, just a start of one, where there's some core biblical values in the center: life, biological sex, marriage, race, and government. And then on the right side, it has a brief summary of the Republican Party stance taken from our party platform in the state. And then on the other side, a brief summary of the Democrat Party stance taken from their, the Minnesota Democrats Party. So it's just something to get people thinking of, like, even, you know, the purpose of government and which party is aligning more with the purpose of government. So these are great tools that you can use. Let's see where we're at. Okay, go to Precinct Caucus. We were talking about that earlier at the other table. Go beyond voting. Precinct Caucus is where you can sign up to be a delegate. And what's exciting and important about being a delegate is it's the delegates who determine who's on the ballot. Okay, so 2026 is a huge year. We're going to have multiple candidates. We already have multiple candidates wanting to be the Republican endorsed candidate for governor. It is critical to conscientious people and praying people to get involved, to be delegates, to get to know the candidates, to pray and discern, ask good questions, and then determine who are you casting your vote for. Who do you think has the ability to win? Who do you think would best represent your values? So you go to Precinct Caucus, sign up to be a delegate. Almost everyone should be able to have a spot for you that night. And then you can go to your county your EPOU convention, and at that convention you have an opportunity to vote. Excuse me. If you had two individuals who wanted to be the Republican endorsed candidate for your state representative or your state senator, that's where you would get to vote on which one you think would do the better job and do you want on the ballot. And then at that point, if you want to continue to be a delegate to the congressional level, so for your CD, are you in CD 8? Yeah, at the CD level and the state level, you would just prepare a super short, like a 30-second speech. And everyone who wants to go on being a delegate to the CD level and the state level, you make this 30-second speech, and then you get to vote for people in the room. And the top vote earners are the delegates, and the next set of batch of delegates below that are alternates. And it's important. Alternates are important. Alternates often get seated. So consider and encourage people you know. October 3rd, 2026, 7 p.m. Beyond that, a couple amazing resources. I don't know if you've heard of the Patriot Academy, but they have free classes available online, like Biblical Citizenship. It's an 8-week class, and it's we're gonna have it. It's like Biblical Citizenship for Education for a Free Citizenry. Basically, we can't protect our freedom if we don't know our Constitution, what our laws are. So it's important to be educated in the founders' structure of our government and the Constitution, so we can be engaged in it. So that's 8 weeks long. They've also, because this is our 250th, the year of our 250th birthday next summer, they've created a Rebuilding Liberty course, 4 weeks. And if you sign up to be a Constitution coach, you can sign up for free, and then you gain access to the classes, and you could host a class in your living room, you could host a class here, at a community space or a library, anywhere. So that's a great resource. And another one is Restore Minnesota. I know I see some friendly Restore Minnesota faces here. So Restore Minnesota develops community action teams, and we have about, I don't know, 16 or 17 or so in the state, and their goal is to restore righteousness by promoting biblical citizenship that educates, equips, and empowers and encourages Holy Spirit-led engagement, county by county, community by community, and family by family through spiritual and civic transformation based on the gospel of Jesus Christ. So Restore Minnesota CAT teams are always full of people who are full of faith and ready to take action and want to link up arms with others. So that's a great thing there. Let me catch up with my notes again. So coming in for a landing here. So coming back to our initial question. Let's see, our initial question here. So again, this is that, the verse from Daniel, which I love. The people who know their God shall stand firm and take action. So, let me go to the next one. Really, revival waits on you. You know, so often we pray and we look to heaven to answer our prayers, but God looks to us to take action. Really, you and I are God's answer to our state and to our nation. And revival is waiting on you. This is another message. I was flying over to Washington, D.C., and this just really struck me. Give me a moment. And this is what God just kind of landed on my heart. Revival will come when the church activates to be Christ's catalyst for godly change. In other words, we look to heaven to answer our prayers, but God is looking to his church to take action. Revival is waiting on you, on your obedience, on your putting your faith into action. And the Lord is saying to us, you can have revival if only you obey. And I have sent revival, I have sent you. So I really want to encourage you to put your faith into action and be Christ's gospel catalyst for righteous change in our state and in our nation. And consider, how could you take action to be the answer to your prayers for our state? And in closing, I want to share with you the story of one young woman, Sophie Scholl. I don't know if you've heard about her, but she was a young woman, a college student in Nazi Germany during the rise of Hitler. And she and her brother Hans joined a group called the White Rose Resistance. And they wrote and printed and distributed anti-Nazi pamphlets, especially on college campuses. Tragically, one day they were caught, and within 24 hours, they were tried and beheaded. Yes, they were tried and beheaded. And in her last hours, this is a quote from Sophie Scholl's last hours. She says, "How can we expect righteousness to prevail when there's hardly anyone who is willing to give himself up for a righteous cause?" And she also said, "Life is always on the edge of death. A little candle burns itself out just like a flaming torch does, but I choose my own way to burn." So I want to light this candle here. So, you know, if you think about it, our lives are a lot like this candle. You know, we only have so much time to burn, and we can only give so much light. But Jesus says to us in Matthew 5, "You are the light of the world. A city set on a hill cannot be hidden. And nor do people light a lamp and put it under a basket, but instead they put it on a stand so that it can give light to all who are in the house. In the same way, let your light shine before others so they can see your good works and glorify your Father who is in heaven." So consider today, where is God calling you to give your life for a righteous cause? And where is God calling you to burn brightly with the truth and the hope of Jesus Christ? You know, all it takes is one light to dispel the darkness. All it takes is one voice to speak the truth. And John 1 says, "In him was light, and the light was the life of mankind. And the light shines in the darkness, but the darkness has not overcome it." And John Helmberger, who is a former leader of the Minnesota Family Council, he said a quote that I love. He says, "If we are shining, we are winning, even in what appears like defeats. So this is how we prevail. So shine on, dear friends." Thank you.